Thank you very much, Dr. Tshering. And before we start floor for some comments from the floor, we have Mr. Shrestha with us representing private sector. And Mr. Shrestha, it would be extremely interesting to know your view from the private sector point of view, how you can play a role in securing food security, water security, and of course developing some sort of resilience to climate change. Do you see any role played that can be played by SAC Chamber of Commerce or by private sector in general?
You just go to that. Very good morning. I must thank the organizers for bringing all of us here under one shade and trying to know, building our network and calculating our net worth also. I think there are a lot of challenges and opportunities for all of us. Being the Vice President of the SAC Chamber of Commerce and Industries and coming from the highland country to the island country, I felt that putting the words from the private sector is a must. We are talking on such an important subject as water resources, food security, and climate change. I think it is so interlinked. And from the private sector perspective, I forced myself, though I was not a speaker for today, but I felt that something has to be shared. We have a lot of specialists here, journalists here, and I, as a private sector, I felt that there has to be something initiated from the private sector to see that make things happen. Well, the SAC as a region with more than 1/5 of the world population, it is one of the poorest among the region, I would say, compared to the other region in the world, and the least integrated region. In spite of hearing and listening from our political leaders for years and decades, nothing much has changed. We have 3 landlocked countries in this region and 2 sea-locked countries. But then the plight of all the countries in the region has not much changed. We have big resources, be it natural resources, be it human resources. Yesterday we have heard from our distinguished speakers the ability, the capability, the resources that we have had in this country, in the whole region, has never been able to be harnessed. We are sitting on top of the gold mine, but we are just calculating the value of the gold only. I think the major factor that we need to focus is, we are talking about physical connectivity, all these things. Among the countries that we have in the region, only Pakistan and India, I think they are naturally and connected, just naturally connected. I'm just stressing the word naturally. They are physically connected. But I think the connectivity should be on the mindset of everybody to make things happen in this region. In the context of Nepal, where we boast about having the highest water resources, potential for the generating hydropower in this country, in the whole, in our country, but we just generate less than 1% of the general potential that we have. The consequence of not managing the water properly has created devastating the calamities in the whole region that we have been watching and just observing only. I think if you have this water managed, a lot of things can happen. I just want to give an example. In the context of Nepal, we say we have a potential of more than 80,000, but from our viewpoint, I think it's more than 150,000 megawatt we can generate in Nepal. And that could cater the entire part, most of the requirement of northern India and Bangladesh and even Pakistan, I would say. Well, because of the lack of the transmission connectivity still yet to happen, it is still creating a lot of obstacles. In the context of water, when you say, I am a colorblind, by the way. In the context of water, when you say there is when the per capita availability of water is less than 1,700 cubic meter, we say it is water stressed. and if it is less than 1,000 cubic meter, then we call it a water scarce. But to fight this, if Nepal, as a country with the Himalayan, with the perennial water source from the mountains, if we can store this water, where I think more than 225 billion liters of water is flowing down to northern India, and we have never been able to harness well. It has created so much of havoc. If you have optimally managed this, probably we could irrigate our land, fertile land, thus by improving the agricultural produce, generating electricity, and also supporting the environment. Because of not having full electricity or energy to grow, a use of petroleum products, the import that we make, because of we don't have the petroleum products, so we import from the Middle East and other countries, and we are spending billions and billions of dollars. So what is the question then? This is, I think, one question that needs to be addressed. So I think the whole region should take into consideration the potential of the Himalayan region, not only Nepal, I would say Bhutan, and northern India also, where we could have a large size storage dams, where we could optimally and effectively utilize the water resources that we could store there, and thereby also generating electricity throughout the year. Otherwise, the same water that is creating could be a blessing or sometimes could be a big hazard that we have been experiencing for years. So on this context, I was trying to tell that because of the environmental, climatical condition and situation, I think you will recall when Maldives had their cabinet meeting under the sea, under the ocean, and Nepal did organize a cabinet meeting in the base camp of the Mount Everest. It was so to the world that the effect of the global warming. So I think in this, we all are equally responsible, but without having any hiccups or ego, I think it is time for us to bring a change. I always say there are three classes of people in the world. One watches, one wonders, and one makes things happen. And these are the class of people that we should have it to make of things happening and collectively effort. The effort collectively would also make a difference. And I think this summit is really a very, very important summit that though we have been having. And I think this summit should come out with some declaration and really focus on these 2-3 issues. And I think the issues that the subject that we are talking is so important that it is going to overall, change the scenario of the whole region. So having all the resources here, we have never been able to harness. So I would appeal to the organizers that we come out with a declaration to make it a point that what we are talking today should be implemented by the policymakers and make a difference and improve the livelihood of the people living in this region. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Shrestha. And in this hall, we are watching on multimedia, we are wondering, discussing, and of course, we are trying to make it happen. So all three types of people sitting in this room simultaneously. Well, we started about 15 minutes late, and as my very unpleasant job is to conclude it in time, but I also see Dr. Akmal Hussain here. So may I request the organizers to extend it by 10 minutes? Can we extend it so that we can also hear from Akmal Sahab as well? Otherwise, I was about to open the floor. Yes, okay, 10 minutes. Thank you, Dr. Sahab. I bought 10 minutes for you. Not for you, I mean for the session, and out of which perhaps 5-6 minutes. So while you joined, and I think you were following the previous agenda where the session had to start at 9:30. Okay, right. So we have discussed the issues of the interconnected issues of food insecurity, the climate change, water management, and we were trying to then see that what can be done at a regional level if we want to make things happen, especially with the regional mechanisms that were discussed yesterday, SARC Food Bank, SARC Climate Change Fund, adaptation mechanisms. We also tried to see the pros and cons of this latest bill that was passed by Indian Parliament on food security, although we didn't discuss it a lot. So just wanted to get your thought on it. You have been working on poverty reduction for last many decades. So your take on these issues, how we can stop these insecurities, breeding further insecurities, and how to give rationality to this whole scene.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My apologies, ladies and gentlemen, for being late. I actually had a back injury and I had to go see a doctor in the morning. Just come from there. Anyway, now this impact of climate change, in a sense, has three dimensions, and I think we need to consider each of these three dimensions before we can arrive at suggestions on how the region can cooperate in managing the impact of these three aspects of climate change. The first, of course, as we all know, there is an increased variability in the monsoons with respect to the timing and location and the quantum of precipitation. This is the direct consequence of global warming. The second aspect of this related is that there is a reduced river flows in the major rivers of the region. In the Indus Basin, one estimate suggests that there's a 16% decline in the main rivers of the Indus, the main tributaries of the Indus. So this reduced river flow has begun to create a major water scarcity problem for the Indus Basin and is likely to do so for the Ganges, Brahmaputra, Meghna basin over the next 2 decades. The third aspect of this is that the higher temperatures are going to have an adverse impact, direct adverse impact on yields per acre of the main cereal crops, food grain crops. The Intergovernmental Panel for Climatic Change in its fourth assessment report has estimated with at a fairly high level of significance, statistical significance, I think it's at the 99% level, that a 2.5 degrees centigrade increase in temperatures, average temperatures, will lead to a 30% decline in the yields per acre, other things remaining the same. And the reason is that these seeds are highly sensitive to heat. So now if you put these three things together, in a region where 65% of the population is either directly or indirectly dependent on the monsoons, and where, as a consequence of these three features, there is likely to be not just a decline in the yields per acre over time if we don't do something about it, but also an increased amplitude in the fluctuations of agricultural output from year to year. And if you look at the data on Pakistan, for example, I dare say somebody in India perhaps may want to do a similar sort of investigation. You find that the number of bad harvests in the last 10 years is about 3 times the number of bad harvests in the preceding 3 decades. So in other words, what we find is that the fluctuation, the amplitude of the fluctuations in agricultural output has increased. And what happens at the bottom end of the fluctuations is that the poorer sections of rural society, the poorer farmers, the peasants, go into kind of immiserization situation where they have to borrow for even consumption purposes, which means that the following year they don't have the investable resources to recoup the production cycle, buy the seeds and the fertilizer and the water and so on. And so in that sense, the increased fluctuations in agricultural output becomes a kind of structural factor that pushes more and more people into poverty over time. Now, what do we do about this? Clearly, I think in history, human communities, when faced with a common threat to survival in a sense, have survived through cooperation. And therefore, since my time is, I have what, two more minutes?
Yes.
Time's up. I'll very quickly go through some of the initiatives that can be undertaken. The first is that to be able to prevent serious food shortages in particular locations, as history tells us, Professor Amrit Sen's thesis also is, that famines usually take place not because there's an absolute shortage of food, but that there is a localized shortage and you can't get the food to the place in time. So I think what we need to do is to cooperate to build up food silos, modern scientifically designed food silos. We're losing, India, Pakistan, I think are losing about 10 to 15% of stored grains simply because of poor storage conditions. The rats get to them, or they get damp and so on. And so we need proper silos, and these silos need to be built in every district. So the SARC idea of a food bank is a very good idea, but this food bank needs to be regionally distributed and located in individual districts. And we need to come to an agreement where a cross-border movement of food grains can take place during periods of severe shortage. So, for example, if you have a severe shortage in Amritsar, then the food silo in Lahore should be capable of being used to supply across the border. That's a quick way of doing it, and vice versa, of course. So that kind of protocol, I think, needs to be signed. The other thing is that we need to very quickly start doing regional level research on developing heat-resistant varieties of food grains. That is a crucial, I think, imperative, and we need to get our scientists together to do this. But I understand that there are some multinational companies which have already done a fair amount of research. They're fairly close to developing heat-resistant varieties of food grains at their end. And of course, if you buy it from the multinational, it's going to be extremely expensive. So I think we need to come to an agreement through the United Nations. I was having a chat with the chairman of WIPO, the World Intellectual Property Organization. And I asked him whether it would be possible to come to an arrangement whereby the larger multinationals which have or are going to develop heat-resistant varieties of food grains could, on the basis of corporate social responsibility, provide South Asia with reasonably priced seeds. So I think that's the second direction to take. And the third, of course, is that we need to cooperate to manage our water resources better. If you end up with a water shortage, then clearly the efficiency of water use becomes very important. And those efficiencies are of three kinds. One, the irrigation efficiency, that is when you pull the water out from the river and put it into the canals and take it up to the farm gate. That's one kind of efficiency that has to improve. We're losing something like 63% of the water during transportation right now. And the second kind of efficiency is on-farm water efficiency. That's called the application efficiency, which is also very low. And the third is to get a bigger bang for the buck, so to speak, which is that the GDP generated per unit of water used in South Asia is something like 1/7 the GDP. I think it's about $3 per unit of water used, compared to $23.8 per unit of water used by the top food producers like Brazil and China. So, there is an argument to be made to improve the amount of GDP we generate per unit of water that we use, which means an improved change in the cropping pattern, going into higher value-added crops which use lesser amount of water. So these are the broad areas in which I think we need to cooperate and start taking initiatives. Cooperate to improve our water use efficiencies, cooperate to develop better seed varieties or make international arrangements where we can get these good seeds, heat-resistant seeds. And thirdly, to be able to develop a decentralized sort of cushion, food cushion for the people of South Asia. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Saab. And I know it's extremely unfair to each one of for each one of the discussants. And these are 3 issues, and asking them to sum it up in 5 to 7 minutes, especially when you are all of you are experts in this field. But I think there are 2 very interesting and innovative ideas that you gave. One is this compulsory licensing regime on seeds, like we have for the medicines, that if there is an epidemic breaks up, so we can, under the compulsory licensing, the national governments, they can ask the multinational to share their patents with the national government. So perhaps it's quite an innovative way of thinking. And now to take this discussion further, we have about 18 minutes to take some of the interventions from the floor. In order to get maximum intervention, may I request all of you to please remain brief. So I will take about 4 interventions, and then I come to you. I have Nagesh Kumar on my list. I have Dr. Lame, Kamlesh, Babar Ali Saab, and Upali ji. 5. And then I'll see if there's more time.
Thank you, Chair. I like to compliment all the very distinguished panelists, but especially the point made by Akmal about ability of the region to use the proprietary knowledge that is locked in the multinational companies, and they have monopoly rights, or that, how to use that. I think we need to move back and go back to the international negotiating table and use the precedents created by this TRIPS amendment, on public health basis to override the patents if there is a public health emergency. And so similarly, in the context of climate change, which is threatening the global community, there should be a rider in the name of climate change adaptation that any technologies that are relevant from that point of view, they help in meeting the impacts of climate change. So environmentally friendly technologies could be, if the companies owning these technologies are not able to license them easily, government should have the right to issue compulsory licenses, just as in the public health case it has been done. So I think this is a very important issue which we should all push. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Lama?
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much. In the context of climate change, we did quite a few reports in the past, the last being the Stimson Center's report, where Akmal was also involved and your center was also involved. One of the things which we discussed in these meetings were how climate change, particularly the erosion in the glaciers in the mountain regions, would affect the river systems in South Asia. The 3 rivers, the Ganges, the Brahmaputra, and the Indus. If you see, we could, when we are analyzing the impact, we could foresee layers of conflict in these 3 regions, because this has an international dimension, a national dimension, and a very, very local dimension. And the conflicts could be at several spheres and stages. It could be at the biodiversity, food, hydrological flows, what you call it, culture, national security. Are we really trying to understand what these conflicts could lead to in South Asia? On the other hand, we are talking about cooperation, integration, and there is a very visible possibility of conflicts emanating from climate change and its impact on hydrological flows in these 3 river systems, and we really do not talk about it. Don't you think that the panelists, this is a right time for us to really think and really reposition ourselves as far as conflicts are concerned? And
about this non-traditional security threats. Babar Ali sir, Can we get the mic here in the second row?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have not heard the word of water conservation or pollution at all. I remember attending a United Nations General Assembly meeting in 1969, this is about 40 years ago. The Netherlands representative pointed out that the glass of water which was lying in front of her had been drunk 7 times before. So there is, conservation of water, recycling of water, so there is plenty of opportunity for us to save water that way, but that is on a micro level. But on a macro level, I think the countries that share the rivers have to put their heads together so that there is an equitable usage of the water and the rights of the lower riparians are fully safeguarded. Not by law, but by humanitarian reasons, and make sure that the usage of water is equitably distributed. Those are issues which need to be discussed in a forum like the Asian Economic Summit, where you've got to look at the region as a whole rather than your selfish needs of one particular country. Thank you.
Okay, the whole concept of crop per drop of water. Upali?
Thank you, Chair. My question is actually related to Mahendra Lama's question as well as the point raised by my previous speaker. In fact, when we refer to Ganges, Brahmaputra, Meghna or Indus river valley systems, it sort of reminds us the Hardin's notion that common pasture land, the tragedy of the commons, which says that these systems are owned by everybody and at the same time nobody. So that summarizes the whole question. So the question that I would like to ask the panelists is, how far can we really think this regional cooperation can play a role in sorting out or addressing this issue? And at the same time, yesterday that came up that we will have a 30 trillion economy by 2030 or so in South Asia. How far can we think of this great wealth in order to preserve the environment as well as converting them into the use of common man? Thank you.
Thank you. Last question for this round, Kamlesh.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Kamlesh Adhikari from Saudi and currently based in Australian National University for my PhD. So I would like to highlight on a point that Dr. Pandey made this morning in his presentation with regard to transboundary nature of climate change and river system and why it needs regional cooperation. So, and it also complements what Upali said just now. In fact, if we see the transboundary nature of many of the issues in the region, then it's not just climate change and river system. There are also many other issues, particularly in the area of agricultural biodiversity. For example, genetic resources, seeds, where there is a major scope for the region to work collectively. And I view that it is high time that South Asia really considers regional commons management strategy where it doesn't only deal with climate change and river system, but also deals with genetic resources and seed management related issues together with many of the biodiversity issues. So I think a regional commons management strategy is needed in South Asia, and if a detailed study is required with regard to what are the commons in the region, then I think that study has to be initiated. And particularly with regard to second point that Dr. Hussain mentioned about reasonably priced seeds and multinational companies, and what Abid mentioned about compulsory licensing, I think these are some of the issues which we really, it will be quite problematic for us to bilaterally negotiate with multinational companies to to deal with regard to reasonable, what is the reasonable price and things like that. And I think I personally feel that South Asia rather should have a common position so as to negotiate at the international level, so that in the international governance itself, this issue is clearly addressed with regard to seed management and how we capitalize from the whole technological development in the field of seeds. Thank you.
There were two more hands, Nadimul Haq and Biswajit Dhar. There, back.
Thank you, Chair. I just, this just taking off from what Kamlesh had mentioned, because I didn't hear any of the panelists mention about biodiversity. And I think it is extremely important for us to see the other side of climate change, and which is conservation of biodiversity. And, when I've been involved in this debate nationally and internationally. Now, the tragedy is that on an issue in which South Asia has such a proactive agenda, we don't get together to form a common position. And, both in the WTO, and we heard yesterday that South Asia has not made a common cause on some of these issues. And also in the other forums where we are discussing these issues in the conventional biological diversity or in the WIPO, it's really a sad state of affairs that South Asian representatives go there and hardly talk to each other. And I think here from forum like this should encourage the governments and the negotiators to actually prepare themselves so that a strong case can be made, because we're just not talking about biodiversity, we're talking about traditional knowledge, we're talking about all kinds of conservation systems which are, there for us to use, and the traditional knowledge provides us, the traditional varieties of seeds, and all this is sort of being lost because we are not proactively moving on this issue. Again,
track two context between policy makers.
Absolutely, and I think that we should have give us very strong message on this count from here. Thank you.
Sure. Nadimul Haq. I'll conclude the session at 11. So,
thank you.
According to my watch, still have 5 minutes.
Still have 5 minutes. Not bad. Okay, Abid Sahab, thank you. Thank you for giving me the floor. I just have two very simple questions. I've been following this session. It's a very interesting session. Learned a lot on a number of issues. But I think we get carried away a little bit in terms of thinking of South Asia as a unit, without taking into account the extreme geographical diversity of South Asia. And the solutions that are being proposed are still very macro solutions on how we can act together as one unit, or as one government, or as a collectivity of governments coming together. But I think, to me, when I saw, for example, the flood in Pakistan in 2010, some of the solutions may be very local. Because even in Pakistan, for example, the diversity between Sindh, Punjab, and the frontier is so huge that some of the solutions have to be local and may be based in local government and local ideas. So I think the one thing that I'd like to get an idea from the panel is, how do they see the sort of trade-off between central response to all these issues as opposed to the local responses? The second thing that I also found, that's something that needs to be clarified a little more. I mean, is it a top-down approach that we are following, or a bottom-up approach? Or for example, are there market mechanisms, especially pricing, which I think received little attention? Are there any market-based mechanisms? By market, I don't mean to go into the traditional argument, market versus government. I mean, can we empower or incentivize the individual through the price mechanism to take certain decisions that may be in their benefit? I'll give you an example. When the 2010 flood happened, all the donors were insisting that we must take aid to the people where they are. So they had a static model in mind, where they said that people living in the floodplain must be provided for with better houses, even flood-proof houses, earthquake-proof houses, with schools and everything. They would not consider the possibility of migration as a solution to the flooding problem. Why should people live in the floodplain? Why should they not move out? But that again means what the incentive, if the incentives are to keep them static, they'll remain there and they'll be disaster prone. Or if the incentives are to move them, they may receive less disasters. Thank you.
Thank you. We didn't hear any voice from our women delegates. Any Any of the women who would like to say something? Well, no, I know Dr. Pokhraj wants to say, but the modus operandi of responding to these interventions from floor, if I can request the organizers, I know that they have been recording this session, if you can email these questions to the panelists and seek their responses through email and all other questions that are there, because I know this topic was extremely important. We are trying to cover a lot in 90 minutes, which is not humanly possible. But I think to make the use of technology, if you can gather all other comments, email it to us, and we will try improvising not only the paper that is presented, but also the recommendations that the forum organizers would be then sharing at a large scale. So with this, as per my promise, it's 11 o'clock. I'm using the chair's prerogative concluding this session. I'm sorry, panelists, I couldn't get back to you for your responses, but please feel free to engage with them during tea break and try to get very exclusive answers to your questions. Thank you for being with us.